Ready. Order, order. Paul Scully to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Walker, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I beg to move that the House has considered e-petition 205476 relating to the enslavement of black Africans in Libya. I'd just like to read the wording of the petition into the record. It reads, to put pressure on Libya to take action to stop enslavement of black Africans. CNN has released video footage of black Africans being sold into slavery in Libya. I'm asking the UK government to put pressure on the Libyan government to take immediate action to stop these criminals from selling more people, to set current prisoners free, arrest the criminals and end this. I'm delighted to welcome the petitioner, Constance Mbasi Manga, who has done a fantastic job in raising this and so many signatures in such a short space of time. I'm delighted she's been able to join us today. There's, to date, this morning, was 265,272 people had signed this petition within only about 3 weeks of the petition going live, as far as I could see, which is a real testament to the strength of feeling that people have on this. It's also interesting because you've had the likes of Cara Delevingne, Naomi Campbell, and Rihanna, and a whole load of rappers that are far too cool for me to know even who they are, that are actually taken this up and put on social media and shared it. And so it's all of this, including the petition system itself, is really here to be part of a campaign, not the end of a campaign, but it's to raise awareness and to make people aware of something that is going on, these horrific things that are going on in another part of the world that they might not have otherwise been aware of at all. And hopefully from this we can start to affect change as well as just raising awareness. Now a week last Sunday was International Human Rights Day. I know a number of us were out and about raising issues. I was talking about the situation in Burma, the Rohingya Muslim community there, about Tamils, and about the Ahmadiyya Muslims, and a number of issues that are close to me and my constituents with the various diaspora groups there. But only a week later, we're talking about something that we thought had long since passed. The idea, Theresa May, the Prime Minister, when she was Home Secretary, brought in the Modern Slavery Bill, something that actually was a fantastic achievement to recognise that slavery still existed in hidden pockets of this country. This is not hidden. This is absolutely brazen and out and about across parts of Libya and across the migrant routes in Libya, and it just has to stop. I was chatting to the minister a little while ago, and we were just talking about the fact that I don't know if he remembers. We were talking about the fact that we shared the view that when people believed that another group of people were subhuman, there's no depths to which they will stoop to actually in their treatment of them. It is worse than animals. So this really started, I think, people being aware of this when the IOM, the International Office of Migration, started to hear about stories and went over to document people's experiences, and really then to come over and make sure that they were writing reports and sharing their voice. But it was only when CNN covered it just a few weeks ago that it really came to the wider awareness of the public. But I just wanted to read one documented bit of evidence from the IOM to illustrate really what's happening. One of the operations officer in Niger reported on the rescue of a Senegalese migrant. He referred to him as SC to protect his identity. And at that time he was returning to his home after being held captive for months. Now, according to his testimony, while he was trying to travel north through the Sahara, he arrived in Agadez, Niger, where he was told he'd have to pay 200,000 CFA, about $320, to continue north towards Libya. A trafficker provided him with accommodation until the day of his departure, which was to be by pickup truck. The journey over 2 days of travelling through the desert was relatively smooth for this group. The International Office of Migration has often heard from other migrants of the route, on that route who's reported seeing the remains of others abandoned by the drivers and of trucks ransacked by bandits who siphon away their fuel. SC's fate, though, was different. When his pickup reached Sabo in southwestern Libya, the driver insisted that he hadn't been paid by the trafficker and that he was transporting the migrants to a parking area where SC witnessed a slave market taking place. Sub-Saharan migrants were being sold and bought by Libyans with the support of Ghanaians and Nigerians who worked for them, they reported. I will indeed.
I thank him very much for giving way. He's making an excellent speech, but he mentioned Nigeria. And on my visit to Nigeria as the Prime Minister's trade envoy, I had a discussion about this problem. And what we all agreed was that if we didn't help to get sub-Saharan Africa right, the catastrophe for Europe that was waiting to happen was colossal, as more and more Nigerians put themselves in the hands of unscrupulous traffickers on the way up to Libya and the Mediterranean coast. Does he agree that that is a realistic situation?
I thank my honourable friend, Member for Henley, for that intervention, and I absolutely understand his expertise and knowledge of the area and totally agree with him that there is a real risk that actually one of the solutions, we can tackle Libya, we can tackle what's happening, the atrocities that are happening with the slave trade in Libya, we can tackle Libya's power vacuum, but ultimately the biggest threat actually to that part of the world is migration. And many other parts of the world as well. And it's not migration just necessarily through conflict, but often it's economic reasons, it's climate reasons, there's any number of reasons that are just moving such mass numbers of people that then cause, have these other situations around them.
Would my honourable friend give way?
Oh, glad to give way.
On that point of a power vacuum in Libya, the UK government continues to support the government of national accord, and yet we're hearing that these things are becoming very much worse than they have been in the past. Would it not be right now for the UK to consider that perhaps that government of national accord is not the answer?
Well, I'm grateful for the intervention. I think what we need to do, and I'd be interested to hear from the Minister at the end, about what we can do with working towards democratic elections to restore a mainstream government in Libya, or create a mainstream government in Libya, which hadn't had one for many years, clearly. But it's something that it's only having a mainstream democratically elected government that in reality we're going to be able to have the long-term view, whichever party that is that makes up that government. So it won't be for us necessarily to pick a horse or run the country or tell that country what to do, but we can help support and working with the African Union and a local offering that we can actually help them create their own destiny and their own future, which hopefully will be a lot more safer and secure. Let me get back very quickly to SC. He managed to get some money from his family. Well, actually, no, sorry. He actually was bought and then brought to his first prison. It was a private home where more than 100 migrants were being held hostage. He said that the kidnappers made their migrants call their families back home and offered suffering beatings when on the phone so that their family members could hear them being tortured. In order to release that from his first house, he was ordered to pay about $480, which he couldn't raise. He was then bought, in inverted commas, by another Libyan who brought him to a bigger house where a new price was set for his release, about $970. And that was to be paid via Western Union or MoneyGram to someone called Al-Haji Baldi, said to be in Ghana. He managed to get some money from his family via mobile phone and then agreed to work as an interpreter for his kidnappers to avoid further beatings. He described some dreadful sanitary conditions and food offered only once per day. Some migrants who couldn't pay were reportedly killed or left to starve to death. He told the IOM that when somebody died or was released, kidnappers returned to the market to buy more migrants to replace them. Women, too, were bought by private individuals, Libyans according to this witness, and were brought to homes when they were forced to be sex slaves. As I said, it was when Naima El-Bagir from CNN reported in a groundbreaking report it was those pictures that really brought this home to so many people in the West. What they actually filmed, they'd heard from their contact that there were 2 auctions going on at the same time. Now, some people in the Libyan government will actually tell you that, oh no, this is only happening sporadically. Well, on this occasion, there were 2 going on at the same time, and the one that they actually filmed was an overflow auction because there were so many people to be sold. And there was also a big buyer in town that wanted to buy people. Just remember the words I'm saying, buy people as commodity, as merchandise, for work on their farm. It is atrocious, and as I'm speaking, I'm sort of reflecting on the actual words that are being used here. And that really, as I say, brought it home. So the officers from the International Office of Migration said, what we know is that migrants who fall into the hands of smugglers face systematic malnutrition, sexual abuse, and even murder. Last year, we learned 14 migrants died in a single month in one of those locations, just from disease and malnutrition. And we're hearing about mass graves in the desert. So based on estimates provided by embassies, the total population of migrants in Libya is about 750,000, mainly coming from Egypt, Niger, Sudan, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Syria, and Mali. Previously, under the Gaddafi regime, there had been about 1.1 million, I think was the estimate, that were predominantly there for cheap labour. But out of those 750,000 that are there now, at least around 450,000 don't see Libya as their final destination. They see it as a migration route through to Europe and further. These are the people in connection houses that are being trafficked. These are the people that are being beaten and whipped by wires. Hundreds of thousands of people. And they're experiencing extreme insecurity in Libya, including arbitrary arrest by non-state actors, detention for indefinite periods of time, bonded labour, harassment, and general exploitation. And it was the other pictures in CNN were not just of the auction, but they were also of the detention centres themselves. And this is something that's a huge concern that I'm going to ask the Minister his views at the end, because these people are being held in, they're sharing small mattresses, but they're effectively in a cage. And it comes back to how I opened up. The fact is that they're being treated worse than animals. How can we have got to the situation where this is even anywhere close to being the case? So these people that have come through Libya, these 450,000 people that see it as a migration route, effectively what they are then doing, they're going to the north coast, they're going to a crossing point, paying another trafficker to get them into a boat, coming across predominantly to Italy, to Lampedusa. A small island which just simply can't cope. I went as a member of the Council of Europe to Lesbos to see some of the hotspots there where the Syrian refugees come from. There were a number of North Africans actually there. Some of the North Africans were actually protesting, throwing things at the bus that I was on, weren't working out why the Syrians were getting preferential treatment. When you can see what they've been through to get to that point, you can understand their concern. But then in terms of the Italy-Libya deal, we need to actually look at actually how this is framed, because as far as I understand, this is a bilateral arrangement that's been supported by the EU, but as far as I understand, it's actually being contested in the Libyan courts by a number of human rights organisations based locally in Libya. So I would ask the Minister how robust that memorandum of understanding between the two countries is, when there are reports of bribes being taken by Libyan coast guards to release migrants to traffickers. And therefore, the second question that leads from that, because DFID itself are doing some fantastic work, as DFID tends to do. They are world leaders in the aid and the support that they actually give. But they're actually supporting more than 20,000 in emergency interventions, such as healthcare, psychosocial support, hygiene kits, and safe shelter. But can we be sure, and I'd be just interested to get the Minister to respond, that we have robust accountability to make sure that any support that we are giving is not being fed into and supporting the cycle of trafficking, but is absolutely focused at the support that I described. It's good to hear that the IOM has managed to up its repatriation flights as well. So their target originally was 1,000 flights a month to go back to take people back to their place of origin. It's now 1,000 people a month. It's now gone up to 15,000 people that they're expecting to repatriate to their original country this month alone. So that's a good sign of the direction that they're actually going in. But I wonder as well what if DFID can get involved either directly or leveraging support from elsewhere in terms of trying to get the numbers, some accurate numbers as well. Because one of the problems that hampers all of this is, and the fact that we've got the power vacuum that I described before, is the fact that nobody really knows the extent of the problem. They're working on using various methodologies, but there's more that we can do to get it accurate. So can we have, say, for example, build up a phone network? So families from around that part of sub-Saharan Africa can actually report in, say, talk about their loved ones, where they are, what's happened, last time they saw them, etc., so that we can start getting some more accurate figures. Of course, the UK government is going to have the competing agenda. We want accountability. Clearly, we want accountability. But also, as my right friend from Southampton says, that we need stability, and we need to prepare for elections as well, and support them in their route towards elections so that we can actually get rid of that vacuum. Because it's only by enforcement. Clearly, everybody knows that slavery is illegal. It already is illegal. There's nothing more you need to do to change the rule, but you actually need someone on the ground that can actually arrest these people, bring them to account, bring them to court, and give them the full force of the law. But if there's nobody on the ground at the moment for any number of reasons, that's just not going to happen. I will.
There is more that, I mean, well, the way people look at slavery these days is a completely different concept to how they would have imagined it some years ago. But many of these people that are being trafficked are getting themselves to the traffickers in order to get to somewhere else. So shouldn't we be looking at perhaps DFID and elsewhere to be trying to educate people in their country or village or town of origin to not embark on that journey in the first place? And wouldn't that be helpful? Would you agree with that?
Scully.
I thank the Honourable friend for the intervention and would absolutely agree with that, because at the end of the day, it's pull factors that are and stopping people from leaving, from having to make that choice to migrate through such a treacherous route. I mean, the fact is that you've got all of that way to go. You've got human traffickers. You've got people that you may be on the end of, you may be just ditched on the side of the road, as I've described. You may be actually sold out of a bus in the back of a car park and then sold on again and beaten and hit with wires. Then you may be then in the Mediterranean in a boat, which actually the technique of these small boats is that as soon as a Navy cutter comes to rescue you, you deliberately capsize the boat to tip you in the water, so they have to pluck you out. They can't just pull you in somewhere. I met, again, going back to the Greek example, when I was there, I met a Yazidi Christian. In that case, as I say, they were coming from a different migrant route, with a 10-day-old child that had gone through that whole process. How that child, who was by that stage 3 months, was still alive, I will never ever know, because these are the most treacherous circumstances. And so anything you can do from stopping the migration happening in the first place has got to be the only course of action. But,
will you give way on that?
I will.
I mean, just to pick up on the last intervention, I think there is a huge role for companies, for British companies, in this process of educating people in their country. I went to see Unilever in Nigeria that has eradicated modern slavery from its whole supply chain. And I think that has had a big effect on trying to convince the Nigerians that they should stay and make something of themselves in their own country. But unless we do that, we're going to run into a lot of problems.
Scully.
My honourable friend makes a typically insightful point, and I think it's absolutely right that we do use some of our big companies that are working in those areas to provide education, to provide secondary industries. That actually what we can do as well, that as we move into looking at trade agreements with Africa, but whilst we're also members of the EU, that we seek to get them to reduce tariffs as well, because one of the big concerns are that you've obviously got tariffs on the least developed countries, but on the slightly better off countries, countries like Nigeria, the everything but arms rules don't apply. So they are being charged a lot of tariffs on coffee, on chocolate, and these sort of things. So they can't build up the secondary industries that would help to develop gainful employment, and actually again have people have a stake in their own area and not feel the need to leave to find a better life elsewhere. I'll just conclude by saying that we are nearly, I talked about the Modern Slavery Act, we are nearly 200 years after the William Wilberforce brought in the Slavery Act. It was only last year that I think they had the remake of that seminal Alex Haley programme, book turned into a programme, Roots. And I remember watching that, and I remember watching it when it was originally out. But even last year when I was watching it, it was something that just seemed of such a time gone by. You know, you've had some fantastic films about slavery as well that really hammered it home, but it just hammers it home as if this is something that was so long ago. Isn't it wonderful that we've stamped it out? We haven't. That's the news. We haven't. It's still going on. It's going on every day. And I would just ask the Minister to see if he can answer those questions, and just finally answer the questions just on Libya specifically, what more we can do as the country, us, to support them, to improve the conditions and ultimately end the need for detention camps in Libya. Thank you, Mr. Walker.
The question is that this House has considered e-petitions 205476